Minister and other party leaders will be speaking out against anti-black racism. Here is the Prime Minister of Canada.
I'll be in the House of Commons to speak about what I know is on a lot of Canadians' minds. I'll have more to say then, but for now, I want to address the role that we, as leaders and allies, have to play. As politicians, we must listen and learn about what needs to be done to fight racism, discrimination, and justice. Because being an ally is about taking a hard look at our existing systems and being committed to doing the necessary work to fix them. Our government is ready to take action. Parce que ce qu'on voit en ce moment, ce ne sont pas des cas isolés. C'est le résultat de systèmes qui, beaucoup trop souvent, tolèrent, normalisent et perpétuent l'injustice et l'inégalité à l'endroit des personnes de couleur.
This is the result of systems, and not only on the other side of the border, but here in Canada, in our communities, and in our own country.
Ça doit cesser.
This has to stop, and people who have never been subject to discrimination or racism have a very important role to play in all of this. We have a responsibility to recognize the injustice in our lives and to take concrete action that reflects our solidarity towards other citizens.
As we move through this pandemic, I know a lot of Canadians are wondering when their community will be able to get back up and running. The short answer is that it depends on where you live and how things are going for your city or your region. That's why every province and territory has its own plan to restart. But as I said yesterday, as a country, defeating COVID-19 is something we must do together. Our government knows that, which is why I've been collaborating with the premiers on a shared approach moving forward. Yesterday, we took a first step with some funding for municipalities. Of course, help for cities and towns is just one piece of the puzzle. We know that provinces and territories also need support on securing personal protective equipment and other vital supplies. And here, too, we're stepping up. Since day one, our government has been working around the clock to secure vital PPE. Just take the fact that we've received more than 100 million surgical masks and nearly 40 million gloves, and are continuing to send a whole range of supplies to the provinces and territories. Or that we've signed a contract for millions of syringes to have the supplies needed once a vaccine is ready. Working with suppliers from around the world is key to keeping Canadians safe. But at the end of the day, one of the best ways to ensure we have what we need, well, it's to make it right here at home. Our government has been working with Canadian manufacturers to make that happen. Over half of our face shields were produced in Canada. Working with companies like Canadian Shield, which retooled to manufacture visors and went from 10 employees to 200, is a win-win. Not only do we build our capacity to make these supplies at home, we support good jobs for Canadians. And the same goes for testing. We're now funding 4 Canadian companies working on what may be breakthrough solutions for COVID-19 rapid testing. Deep Biologics in Guelph, Nicoya Life Sciences in Kitchener, Forian in Edmonton, and Metabolic Insights in Kelowna. This is on top of the support we've already provided testing, including for precision biomonitoring, as they set up a test kit manufacturing facility in Ontario. We're making huge progress, but we have to keep going. As we restart the economy, demand for supplies will go up, and Canada must be able to keep up. So whether it's N95 masks or ICU equipment, we will continue our work with the provinces and territories on the supplies we need going forward.
Whether it is to secure individual protective equipment or to support municipalities, we will continue to work with the premiers of the provinces and territories to ensure that everyone is safe. We have already distributed hundreds of thousands of items to frontline workers and began when this crisis erupted. But we also know that over the long term, one of the best ways of ensuring that we have the equipment we need is to make it right here at home. So in recent months, we have made targeted investments to increase our production capacity. Today, almost half of our facial shields are being manufactured in Canada. We've also made progress on testing. We are now funding 4 Canadian businesses whose work could allow us to make a major breakthrough when it comes to rapid testing for COVID-19. And we're also supporting the business Precision Biomonitoring in Ontario, which is setting up a plant that will produce test kits. We're moving in the right direction, but we must do more. With the economic recovery, the demand for these types of products will increase. That's normal. So we will continue to work with the provinces and territories to ensure that they have enough personal protective equipment.
To support Canadian jobs, to restart the economy, we have to work together. And it's not just as governments, but across sectors, too. Last month, we set up the Industry Strategy Council. Led by Minister Baines and chaired by Monique Leroux, their mandate is to take a deeper dive into the specific challenges and pressures that different industries are facing. Today, Minister Baines announced the Council's membership, 9 business leaders from across the country, who each represent a different pillar of our economy. This team will bring together government and industry to meet and discuss regularly as we plan our path forward.
Since this crisis began, we have noted just how important support and solidarity are. And that does not apply only to the pandemic. There are so many issues around the world that cannot be resolved by a single government or a single country. And I'm thinking of the fight against climate change, for example. That is a priority for our government, and we will continue to take action to protect the future of our children and our planet. But we cannot do that alone. And the good news is that we do not have to do it alone. For example, the Alliance, Powering Past Coal, which brings together more than 100 members around the world, is doing an amazing job to improve the quality of our air. Now, the Alliance, earlier founded by Canada and United Kingdom, will be announcing its new members, including the Desjardins movement. It will become the first North American financial institution to join that alliance. Here, Canadians are also showing the path forward, and our government will always be there to support this type of initiative.
I want to end this morning by recognizing that today is La Festa della Repubblica, which is the perfect time to wish everyone a happy Italian Heritage Month. For generations, Italian Canadians have made our country a stronger, better place. So it comes as no surprise that during this pandemic, just like always, this community is stepping up to help. Maybe you've been taking groceries over to an elderly neighbor. Or maybe you were one of many who helped raise $1 million for the Italian Red Cross. However you're lending a hand, thank you. It just goes to show that we are stronger together. The
values that embody the Italian community, hard work, family, generosity, are important to all of us. Today and every single day, we recognize the many ways this community contributes to our country and to our lives. Happy Italian Heritage Month. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Premier ministre. On va commencer la période de questions aujourd'hui par le téléphone. Opérateur, c'est à vous.
Thank you. Merci. First question, Lee Bertram, the Canadian Press, line open.
Yes, Prime Minister, thanks for talking to us today. I would like to know what, if anything, your government plans to do to help Canadians and activists leave Hong Kong. Specifically, is Canada prepared to give pro-democracy advocates safe haven or asylum in Canada?
Canada is a country that has always welcomed people from around the world fleeing persecution and violence. We have a strong immigration system that looks at individual cases, looks at systemic challenges and responds to them, and I know our system is doing just that.
For a very long time, Canada has given refuge to people fleeing violence around the globe. And we have a system in place to look at such cases and look at the issues involved and make the right decision.
So So you're not committing to any action to help Hong Kong at this point in time?
No. We continue to be
the activists in Hong Kong.
We continue to be very concerned about the situation in Hong Kong. We have 300,000 Canadian citizens who live in Hong Kong and millions of others who are fighting for justice and peace. These are things that we obviously are watching and following very carefully. We will continue to stand up for peace, for dialogue, for de-escalation of tensions, and for Beijing to engage constructively with the people of Hong Kong.
Thank you. Operator, next question.
Thank you. Merci. Prochaine question, Raymond Fillon, TVA. À vous.
Bonjour, Monsieur le Premier ministre.
Good morning,
Question
Prime
sur le
Minister.
hockey
A
d'abord.
question on hockey first. Will a Canadian study be able to present the playoffs, or will that be too complicated? We know there are 3 cities that are interested in bringing in the NHL players for the playoffs, but first of all, we need to ensure that we are protecting our communities and our citizens. So I know that the discussions are underway between the governments and the NHL, but it's too early to say what the result of that will be. But we understand that this is something that many people would like to see happen, but at the same time, we need to ensure that we're doing the right thing to protect Canadians.
I understand that discussions are ongoing between the NHL, the government, and public health authorities. I think everyone would love to see some games played in any number of Canadian cities. But at the same time, we need to make sure that what we're doing is keeping Canadians safe every step of the way. That's why discussions are ongoing with between public health and the interested parties.
En suivi, Raymond.
Follow up? On the situation in the U.S. now, what do you think about using the army against the protesters and using tear gas at a photo op? I think all Canadians are looking at this with concern and horror. And I think we all have to know that systemic discrimination, anti-Black racism, and intolerance still exist in Canada. These are acts of violence, but we're also talking about microaggression, and this is something that people face every single day. And we have to look at ourselves carefully, look at our systems, and work together to improve things here for Canadians of different origins.
Thank you. Merci. Prochaine question, Hélène Buzetti, Le Devoir. À vous.
Good morning, Mr. Trudeau. On another topic, there are some foreign ministers who are asking you to publicly denounce the annexation of a certain territory by Israel. I'd like to know what your comment is on this and why you haven't been more vocal on this. Why haven't you denounced this? Well, I have been very clear that we continue to support a two-state solution and that we do not agree with unilateral action on either side. Of course, we're very worried about the annexations being proposed by the Israeli government. I made that point directly to Prime Minister Netanyahu and his alternate PM, Benny Gantz, when I spoke to them a few weeks ago. We know that the best way to address these challenges and to achieve peace in the Middle East is through dialogue among the interested parties and not through unilateral action such as this.
We are firm in our commitment to a two-state solution as a country. I have highlighted both publicly and directly to Prime Minister Netanyahu and alternate Prime Minister Benny Gantz the importance of staying away from measures that are unilateral and are deep concerns and disagreement with their proposed policy of annexation. We think that the path forward is a two-state solution reached to by dialogue between the parties involved, and anything that is unilateral action by either side is unhelpful in the cause of peace.
En suivi, Hélène?
Follow-up? Yes, as a follow-up, I understand that you're denouncing this, but is there something that Canada can do, impose sanctions, or bring pressure to bear on them? Can we go further than just denouncing this kind of action so that things don't get worse? Well, I made the point directly to Israeli leaders that we're very concerned about these actions and that we believe that this will delay and any progress and represent a barrier to any progress in the Middle East. So we must work together based on dialogue and respect, and this kind of action is of deep concern to us.
Thank you. Last question. Brett Forster, APTN National News. Line open.
Hello, Prime Minister. The final report of the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls was released a year ago. It concluded a genocide happened and is happening in this country. Do you believe Indigenous peoples have been and remain subjected to genocide in Canada?
I think the situation that has been faced by Indigenous Canadians for decades, for generations, for centuries is appalling and needs to stop. Many people have talked about cultural genocide, used very strong words for it, and I think there are very strong words necessary to talk about the continued injustice towards Indigenous peoples that is ongoing in Canada, which is why we need to do better as a country. We need to work with Indigenous partners on the road to reconciliation. We need to be there in respect and partnership, and that is what our government has pledged to do.
As a follow-up?
Yes. What word would you use to describe this? You mentioned cultural genocide. What word would you use to describe this?
I think the words that we continue to focus on is how we use reconciliation, how we use partnership, how we use shared stewardship of the land, how we reach out a hand to fix the grievous historical wrongs. We need to be focused on building a better present and future. And that means recognizing the past, but also putting in place the partnerships to move forward. There are lots of words that can be used. We need to use them, and we need to move forward.
Hi, Prime Minister. Molly Thomas, CTV National News. I was looking at the latest procurement numbers, and we have less than 10% of N95 masks that we have asked for across the globe, a fraction of the gloves and gowns that we need. How far away are we from domestically supplying everything that we need for PPE here in Canada? I mean, are we 20% there? Are we 50% there? How far along are we?
From the very beginning, we have worked extremely hard to ensure that our frontline workers and more across the country get the PPE that they need. And we have worked with partners around the globe to procure millions of items to ensure that people are protected. But at the same time, we've ramped up local production in a significant way. We've restarted domestic production of many of these items so that we don't have to be just reliant on overseas imports. That has worked very, very well. We continue to have enough supplies to supply the provinces in their needs right now. But as we reopen, we know we're going to need more as more and more industries begin to restart and need PPE. That's why we're continuing to ramp up production. We're continuing to ramp up the scale of importation. And we will continue to ensure that there is enough PPE right across the country.
Hi, Prime Minister. Tom Perry, CBC. You've been reluctant to comment on the words and actions of the U.S. president, but we do have Donald Trump now calling for military action against protesters. We saw protesters tear gas yesterday to make way for a presidential photo op. I'd like to ask you what you think about that, and if you don't want to comment, what message do you think you're sending?
We all watch in horror and consternation what's going on in the United States. It is a time to pull people together, but it is a time to listen. It is a time to learn what injustices continue despite progress over years and decades. But it is a time for us as Canadians to recognize that we too have our challenges, that Black Canadians and racialized Canadians face discrimination as a lived reality every single day. There is systemic discrimination in Canada, which means our systems treat Canadians of color, Canadians who are racialized, differently than they do others. It is something that many of us don't see, but it is something that is a lived reality for racialized Canadians. We need to see that, not just as a government and take action, but we need to see that as Canadians. We need to be allies in the fight against discrimination. We need to listen, we need to learn, and we need to work hard to figure out how we can be part of the solution on fixing things. This government has done a number of things over the past years, but there is lots more to do, and we will continue to do that because we see you, we see the discrimination that racialized Canadians live every single day.
Of course, we are watching what is happening in the United States with a great deal of concern. We know that this is a time where people have to listen and learn and take action. But here in Canada, we also are facing major challenges. Systemic discrimination exists in this country, and that means that our systems, our institutions, and everything that we have in place in this country does not provide for equal treatment of Canadians of different origins. And understanding that reality, truly understanding it, not just seeing the contrast with the United States and saying, oh, well, things are a lot better here, but actually saying we have major challenges here in Canada as well, and we have to act to eradicate them. That is what brings us today to reflect on everything we can do as individuals, as allies, to understand the lived reality of Canadians of different origins, and to be there to help them, to support them, to listen to them, to work with them, to build a life founded on respect for each other.
Why, though, are you so reluctant to comment directly on the words and the actions of the U.S. president?
My job as a Canadian Prime Minister is to stand up for Canadians, to stand up for our interests, to stand up for our values. That is what I have done from the very beginning, and that is what I will continue to do. Canadians need a government that will be there for them, that will support them, and that will move us forward in the right direction. And I will do that.
Canadians need a government that will be there to defend them and protect them and support the interests and values of Canadians. And that's what I've always done, and that's what I will always do.
The Globe and Mail. Prime Minister, in 2017, a UN report on anti-Black racism in Canada found continued conditions deplorable. They talked about the inequities that continue in Nova Scotia, for example, 30 years after segregation ended. And one of their recommendations was for your government to issue an apology for Canada's history of slavery and other historic inequalities and consider reparations. Why haven't you done that, and will you do it?
Over the past years, our government has worked very, very closely with the Black community, with members and thought leaders within the community to respond to the very many tangible things that need to be done to support Black Canadians, to counter the systemic racism, the systemic discrimination that continues to exist within Canada, within our institutions. Everything from microaggressions to acts of violence are part of the daily lived reality for far too many Canadians. And what we're seeing in the United States and what Canadians are speaking about here in Canada underlines the fact that we need to act. And acting means many things. Yes, we've created more funding for community organizations. We've invested in Statistics Canada to collect more disaggregated data. But we know that there's much more to do. We're working with the Black business community to make sure that there's better access to capital for young entrepreneurs so that there are economic opportunities going forward. We need to take a hard look at our institutions, at our structures, to ensure that those barriers that may be invisible to many of us, but far too present for Black Canadians and racialized Canadians, are addressed. There are a lot of things to do, and we will continue to work with the Black community on the things we need to do.
For a number of years now, we have been working with the Black community right across the country to respond to its needs and to address what they are experiencing every day. We have provided additional funding for community organizations. We are helping Statistics Canada to collect better data, more specific data, and we're also investing to support Black entrepreneurs from various communities. These are investments we are making to build resilience within those communities. That's very important as well. We will continue to work together with the community on the issues of concern to them, but we have a lot of work to do here in Canada.
Answer my question. My question is very specific. You say you've had time to talk to leaders in the Black community, people in the Black community, and you've had this report now for almost 3 years, and you still can't answer this question. Will you issue an apology, and will your government rule out reparations for slavery in Canada?
We will work with the Black community across this country, as we have, to respond to their priorities. There is a lot to do in Canada, and we will do it in partnership with them.
Bonjour, Monsieur Trudeau. Louis Blouin, Radio-Canada.
Radio-Canada. Yesterday, you talked about the efforts being made to collect ethical data on various groups. Now, is there a blockage happening in certain provinces, and when can we expect to get that more specific data? We're working with the provinces on data collection at this time. This is an issue that we have been working on for some time now. Collecting ethnographic data is something we've been working on, and we're trying to address that need now. But the reality is that for much of the data we've already collected, it's much too late to go in and look at more specific, detailed information. We have to change our systems quickly to be able to do that. There's some information that Air Canada would like to get out of the transaction with Air Transat. Now, what can you tell us about that, and can you do something to ensure that Air Canada can now withdraw from that transaction? Well, we're in a difficult context at this time, and that's the case for many businesses. And we know that the decisions being made by businesses in this situation are not necessarily ideal. We will continue to work with the airline industry to support Canadian travelers, and we'll be looking at this specific situation in terms of the transaction between Air Canada and Air Transat to see what needs to be done to ensure that Canada remains a competitive country globally for airline travel.
Mr. Janet Silver, Global News. You and your government has defended the WHO repeatedly and refused to say whether you trust the data China was providing early on. Even your health minister has accused journalists of questioning the data, peddling conspiracy theories. I'm wondering, do you still believe the Chinese data can be trusted, and do you think the WHO was wrong to publicly praise the regime, even though they weren't getting the information they needed early on?
I think there are many questions that need to be asked about the WHO, about China and other countries' behaviors through this. We need to focus right now on doing everything we can to keep Canadians safe and to end this pandemic, not just in Canada, but around the world. And the WHO remains a really important partner and ally in doing that. But there are many questions that need to be answered going forward in regards to the systems we have in place and in terms of different countries' behaviors. And those questions will be asked and answered as we move forward.
Merci beaucoup. C'est ce qui m'a fait la conférence de presse d'aujourd'hui.
Merci tout le monde.
That is the Prime Minister of Canada on this Tuesday.